Jupiter, the planet of expansion, growth, faith. This is the greater benefic in astrology. And we all have a Jupiter placement in our birth charts that we carry with us for all of our lives that symbolizes our unique cosmic lucky break if we access that Jupiter point consciously. So what happens when Jupiter in the sky, meaning transiting Jupiter, makes a conjunction to your natal birth Jupiter placement? Well, this is stimulating your natal Jupiter placement. This is waking up Jupiter in a phenomenal way. And it will happen for all of us approximately every 12 years. This is called the Jupiter return. And I'm going to talk to you today about this phenomenal chart and how fun it is to track it over the next 12 years of your life when you have one. But first, I want to introduce myself. My name is Maria DeSimone. Welcome to my channel. If you're brand new here, I am a professional astrologer, and you can find out more about me and my work over at my website, insightfulastrology.com. And that is where I teach my classes, and you can schedule consultations or hire me as your astrology coach. But this channel, this is where I give astrology content on my YouTube feed. So please be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you're enjoying my videos. That's definitely appreciated. And what inspired this particular video is I'm getting a really great response from you guys on my instructional videos where I'm looking at birth charts and I'm showing you, I'm bringing astrology to life. And what I'm doing more often than not is using my own birth chart because I know my life very well. And I have documented my astrological cycles over the years in my astrology journals. And that is something that I always encourage my students and all astrology enthusiasts to do because it helps us become better astrologers. It helps us understand the significance of these cycles and how they reflect in our life and development. So my Jupiter placement is in Pisces. And if you know anything about what's going on in the cosmic sky in 2022 right now, Jupiter is in Pisces. And this morning, February 23rd at about 7:12 a.m., I celebrated my Jupiter return, which is something that only happens every 12 years. And now I have a brand new 12-year chart with Jupiter emphasized that I'm going to teach all of you how to kind of unlock the power of your Jupiter return chart for yourselves. But first, before I even get to showing you the charts, what does a Jupiter return represent? Well, if Jupiter in your birth chart talks about faith and growth, and Jupiter in general in astrology represents our spiritual quest, it's faith, it is our academic pursuits, it is internationalism and travel. Jupiter is connected to inspiration and where we want to grow in general in our lives, okay? So that is Jupiter. Now, when Jupiter returns, you're infused with this huge, enthusiastic, it's just a push. It's just a gigantic, enthusiastic push to do Jupiter, to embody Jupiter, to embrace your Jupiter energy more than usual. And so you might find that when you are having your Jupiter return during that year, and it could be the entire year, you are just feeling more Jupiterian in general. You have found that your zest for life returns in a whole new way. Your confidence in life, your faith in life and all of its possibilities is restored. You want to get out there again and you want to grow as a person. This is an important component with the Jupiter return cycle. You are ready as an individual to grow in a new direction as a human being. And it's beautiful. It's usually a very positive time. You're feeling better. You're inspiring others. You're just ready to do Jupiter and embrace the goodness that Jupiter wants to give you. You're more conscious. You're more consciously connected to your Jupiter at this time. And for everybody, since the Jupiter return will occur approximately every 12 years, you can expect a Jupiter return when you're 12 years old, about when you're 24 years old, when you're 36 years old, when you're 48 years old, so on and so forth. Now, it is not exact because it all depends on the rate of your Jupiter placement and how fast it travels. So for example, I am having a Jupiter return today, February 23rd. I am not turning 48 until May 8th. So there could be a slight discrepancy, just slight, okay, no big deal. But just know that in general, the Jupiter return will occur approximately every 12 years. And that theme chart, it creates a brand new chart for you in terms of Jupiter ruled matters, where you can track this chart and read it as a standalone chart and understand what your blessings are really going to focus on in the next 12 years. And more importantly, how you as a predictive astrologer can time when it's going to be triggered. When are these blessings coming into manifestation in the physical plane for you? Okay. And so there is a book that I highly recommend on all returns, okay? And I may end up turning this into a little bit of a series. I do teach a planetary returns workshop. It is something that that's always a part of my curriculum for my students. So if you're interested in getting on the waiting list for that, go ahead and send me an email through my contact form on my website, and I'll leave a description in the description below the website link. But in general, this book, I believe, is one of the holy grails of returns. Celeste Heal, Identifying Planetary Triggers. I am a huge fan of Celeste Heal, all of her work, all of her books. I recommend all of them. But very specifically to talk about planetary returns, this book gives a really nice, comprehensive understanding of each planetary return and how to understand it and use it in your life, okay? So your Jupiter return will happen every 12 years. And at that moment, so this morning for me, it's 7:12 a.m. here in New York, whatever was happening in the sky with the planets, that created a snapshot. And that is a birth chart unto itself that I am now going to be able to use for the next 12 years of my life. So however the planets in the sky were interacting with my natal Jupiter placement when I had that return, this is a whole new birth chart. It's different from the natal birth chart, but when you read a planetary return chart, you do always want to refer to the natal chart. You go back and forth. You start out by reading it as a standalone chart, and you look at all the nooks and crannies, and you have some fun with it, and then you compare it to your birth chart. And you want to look for certain things like, well, is anything that is represented in my birth chart on an angle in the return chart? Or is there a correspondence of energies? Is something being repeated from my birth chart in this return chart? There's so much to look for. What else do I want to say about this before I start showing you charts? It is the Jupiter return it typically coincides with a time period where you're feeling ready to get out into the world again. And I think I mentioned that, but I want to kind of go a little bit deeper, because this could be a wanderlust energy for some of us. This could be an itch that we have to scratch. It could be a thirst for knowledge that all of a sudden we have to take a class, we have to study a subject, we have to do something in an academic direction, or we are compelled to teach what we know. But it can also be this travel bug, this need to get out in the world again. And I really do believe that this is significant for most of us during the very time, the couple of months around our actual Jupiter return. And to give you an example, my Jupiter return is today. And as you know, if you've been watching my videos, I have recently started to study a new language, even though I am Italian American. My whole family speaks Italian on my father's side. It never really got through to me, despite 6 years of taking it in junior high school and high school and always being around someone who talks Italian, I never properly learned the language. And now I am enrolled, and I just had my second lesson on Monday. Okay, I am enrolled in an actual Italian school in Manhattan. And it is school, and I am learning a brand new language. And this is such a Jupiter return energy. It is so reflective of the Jupiter return energy. And in another video, I talked about the parallel of that with the North Node in Taurus currently being conjunct my natal Mercury placement. So that's another reflection of this particular theme in my life. You're going to see this, guys, that when you have major life events, the astrology repeats in themes. And this is how you become a better predictive astrologer. You want to pick up on these themes. So back to the Jupiter return chart, you will find in your life that you want to learn something new. You want to expand in some way. And so for me, it is studying Italian. Now, in addition to that, you may have this travel bug. I really think that I have this travel bug going on in me, because I think it's quite significant that in March, next month, for the first time in 9 years, guys, I'm going to get on a plane and start traveling again. I haven't been on a plane in 9 years. Last time I was on a plane was with my best friend, Doreen, and her husband for her 60th birthday. And we went to St. Martin, and that was 9 years ago. Oh my God. So all of a sudden, I now have an opportunity to travel again, but it's because I'm giving myself permission to grow and to seize the moment and to take the opportunity. Now it's, nowhere extravagant just yet. I am going to Florida to stay with a cousin at her house for a week, dipping my toe in the travel water. I'm a Taurus. I have to do things a little slowly. But remember, my intention is to travel extensively. And I have a very big plan in a couple of years for my 50th birthday to go to Italy and spend several months there, and then possibly buy an apartment there and start to live between Italy and New York. This is Jupiter return stuff, guys. This is really. And in addition to that, connecting to the other culture energy for me, for you, it's going to be different. But for me, I am also, I've hired a lawyer, Jupiter rules attorneys, and I'm getting my dual citizenship. I'm becoming an Italian citizen in addition to being born an American citizen, because I have that, the right through my father's bloodline to do that. So again, the Jupiter return happened this morning. All of this is happening now, literally within the next month, less than the next month, within the next 3 weeks. I will, I'm having conversations with my new attorney. I'm going to Florida, first time on a plane in 9 years. I already 2 weeks ago started Italian school. See, Jupiter. Now, as an astrologer and as an astrology teacher, my classes have changed. And I am so inspired now to provide more classes through Zoom and through sharing charts and doing things in a different way to just expand the repertoire of my curriculum, of my way of sharing information with my students. And so that will also include online classes that I'm developing, which I've never done before. I teach them in a personalized way with students. And so you see the Jupiter return at work again. And this is all new stuff, all new stuff. So you're going to notice this in your lives, guys, related to your Jupiter placement, wherever it is in your chart and however it works through in your Jupiter return chart. The themes of Jupiter are coming through you now. You will feel more open. You will feel more adventurous. You will feel more faith-driven and spiritual and optimistic and inspirational and ready to get out there and experience the world and grow. So on that note, let me start sharing my screen, and I'm going to bring this to life for you, bring astrology to life here, and talk to you a little bit about my Jupiter return and how you can understand the finer points of your Jupiter return when you are trying to analyze it for yourself. And we always begin with the birth chart because we want to see, well, what's Jupiter doing in the birth chart? And then once we see what Jupiter is doing in the birth chart, we're going to go and compare it with the Jupiter return chart. So this is my Jupiter placement, guys. In my birth chart, I was born with Jupiter in Pisces at about 12.5 degrees in the 12th house. I have an extremely blessed Jupiter placement. It is in, it's in a sign of rulership, traditional rulership here. It is in its home house. It's in a very happy place here. Jupiter in Pisces in the 12th house is about as happy as you can get for a Jupiter placement. The only better placement for Jupiter, or the equal placement, would be Jupiter in Sagittarius in the 9th house, if you had that natally, okay? So I was born with a beautiful Jupiter. My Jupiter is, you want to look at the aspects that your Jupiter is making in your chart, okay? Jupiter in my chart is making an almost perfect trine to Mars in Cancer, which happens to be my chart ruler because I have Aries rising. So that is a really blessed link that I have. And Jupiter is also making a square to both the moon and Neptune here in my 8th house. Squares to Jupiter tend to overdo. Okay, you just overdo with Jupiter. Remember, Jupiter is the greater benefic. It is not necessarily going to wreck your life if you've got squares with Jupiter, but it is going to introduce a tendency to overdo something. Okay, so in this case with Jupiter square Neptune moon here, maybe I am not too naive. Maybe I over idealize things. Maybe I see the best in people too much. Okay, too trusting kind of an energy. So that, and so yes, that can trip me up sometimes, but that's just my personality. And so Jupiter is, you want to look at what house Jupiter rules. And for me, it rules the 9th house. So that's, again, natural house of Jupiter. So bottom line, Jupiter's in good shape in my birth chart, okay? And we want to now look and see, well, if Jupiter is in such great shape in my birth chart, talking about someone who is automatically very spiritually driven and divinely guided and divinely protected, which I am, and I've always felt that, what does this Jupiter return say now? How is this Jupiter return in Maria's chart, Maria's life, going to symbolize the next 12 years of Jupiter potential? And how can she access it? How can we time the events that may be going on? So now let me take you to the Jupiter return. And this is my Jupiter return chart. And you can see that Jupiter is kind of in the same place that it was in my natal chart, okay? But it's closer to the ascendant. So there are some differences here. So once again, I'm having my Jupiter return this morning, had it, and Jupiter is at 12.5 degrees of Pisces in my 12th house. And this time it is closely conjunct my ascendant, okay? So Jupiter is on an angle this time around. And something you always want to look for in your return charts is an angular planet. Are there any planets that are angular? Because angular planets are, the angles in astrology are points of energy manifestation. And if you have planets on an angle, doesn't matter what planet, doesn't matter what angle, that planet is going to be loud and proud in your life. It is going to really come into contact with the external world, with your external environment in a significant way. So in this Jupiter return chart, I've got Jupiter conjunct the ascendant. It's a pretty close orb. So it is angular. And I also have Neptune conjunct the ascendant here. So Jupiter is moving towards that conjunction with Neptune. We're going to have that big Jupiter-Neptune conjunction very soon, which I will do a separate video on for all of you to understand more about. But you can see that in my Jupiter return chart, with Jupiter being on the 12th house side, at home there, but on the angle, conjunct the ascendant, and leaning towards Neptune, which is also angular in my Jupiter return chart, we have a very clear Jupiter return story about heightened intuition, heightened spirituality. So I think over the next 12 years, I'm probably going to become more psychic than I've ever been in my entire life. I think that goes without saying when you just look at that in this particular way. And so my compassion might become stronger. I may become more sensitive. If you have to now look at, since you're reading this as a standalone chart, you want to look and see, well, what's Jupiter doing? What's Neptune doing? If Neptune is making hard aspects in the chart, then we might be worried that Maria is going to go down a really slippery slope over the next 12 years. And maybe Maria is going to go crazy or go delusional or become an alcoholic or drug addict. Okay, this is the shadow of Neptune. Fortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case in this chart because Neptune is only receiving positive aspects. Neptune is receiving positive aspects from every single Capricorn planet here. We have a Venus, Mars, Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. All of that is closely sextile Neptune. That's supportive. The moon is at the very end of Scorpio, it's separating. It's a separating trine, but it's not in a difficult aspect at all. And again, we see that Jupiter is moving towards a conjunction to Neptune, and Neptune is on the angle. So this is good. This is all good energy that we're talking about here. As a matter of fact, this whole Jupiter return chart, overall, it is a very blessed chart. So it makes me very excited. Now, moving on with the standalone themes, look at the aspects of Jupiter in your Jupiter return chart next. That's very, very important. Once you determine, well, what's angular? Is there anything angular? Look for angularity. Look for the aspects that any angular planets are making to the rest of your chart. Look for the ascendant of your Jupiter return and the ascendant ruler. In this case, it is Pisces rising. So the modern ruler of Pisces is Neptune, which is conjunct the ascendant, and the traditional ruler of Pisces is Jupiter, and this is a Jupiter return, and Jupiter is also conjunct the ascendant. So again, this fortifies it. It strengthens that Jupiter return energy for me. And now you look at your Jupiter placement and what aspects is Jupiter making. Look for the closest aspects. So if you look, you can see that there is a very close sextile between Jupiter and Uranus. Uranus is there in the second house, and it is in Taurus. And that very close sextile can symbolize, again, reading it as a standalone chart, extreme material benefits over the next 12 years through Uranian-ruled endeavors, which Uranus rules astrology. I am an astrologer, and that is one possible manifestation of this. It's also through technology, the internet, okay? Remember, your Jupiter return chart, since Jupiter is the greater benefic, it is going to talk about material benefits, okay? It will talk about your ups, your financial ups and downs over the next 12 years, and your highs and lows in terms of your Jupiter life and your growth potential. So the material gains here are symbolized also because Uranus happens to be in the money house in this chart. It's in the second house. And that close sextile, again, Jupiter angular, sextile Uranus, and Jupiter in my Jupiter return chart, you want to look to see, well, what does Jupiter rule? Jupiter rules my midheaven, my career sector, and my ninth house in the Jupiter return. We got both going on there. So that adds more oomph to the fact that Maria's going to be making some nice money over the next 12 years connected to her professional career as an astrologer, utilizing technology. Okay, that really is very clear in this standalone chart. Now, you also want to see what other aspects there might be to Jupiter. And, you could, I don't know if you guys know how to read an aspect grid, but you can kind of cheat here. And if you don't want to look by eye, which I'm used to doing, but if you want to cheat, you could see, again, Jupiter conjunct the ascendant. These are minor aspects. I'm not even going to focus on that. Jupiter is sextile Uranus, which we talked about, and Jupiter is making a wide conjunction to the sun in this Jupiter return chart, which is also in the 12th house. Okay, so this is good energy. Now, after you've done all of that, look at the rest of the chart. Okay, what's going on in the rest of the chart? Well, in this particular chart, we have a stellium of Venus, Mars, and Pluto conjunct in Capricorn in the 11th house. And this speaks of incredible, strategic, business-oriented, powerful oomph in 11th house matters over the next Jupiter return cycle, over the next 12 years, that are very likely to be well received by others and lead to success. Pluto here is sextile rather, the moon. Even though, again, it's a separating sextile, it is close. So that adds to more energy of, well, this is going to be well received by the public. The moon rules the public. Okay, what else can I say about this Jupiter return chart before going to the natal? So there's a square here. We want to look at the good and the bad, right? The only difficult energy here is the square between Mercury and Uranus. And that can be that, Maria is going to have a very rebellious mind over the next 12 years as she talks about her what she wants to teach. She may be teaching things, Jupiter teaching, she may be teaching things that are really out there over the next 12 years. Who knows? Who knows? I may go from teaching astrology, which some people might think is out there. I don't, but and you don't, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this. But I may start getting obsessed with some other out there topic. Okay, who knows? But it does look like that's a danger of kind of overdoing that. So I do have to be conscious of that. That's really the worst thing that I could say about this Jupiter return chart. And that is basically the energy of the major aspects. Now, let's talk about comparing the natal chart to your Jupiter return chart, and then see, well, what triggers this? How do you know when things are going to happen? Okay, so going back to the natal chart really quickly, I'm just going to have to go back and forth and show you. Look at the midheaven in the Jupiter return chart. There it is, about 24, almost 24 degrees of Sagittarius, okay? And my north node in the Jupiter return chart is almost 27 degrees of Taurus, okay? So when we go to the natal, what we see in the natal chart is that north node, like I said, is closely conjunct my natal Mercury. And the north node of the moon in my natal chart is conjunct the midheaven of that Jupiter return chart. So that you want to make those connections. You want to then go back to your birth chart and say, well, is there anything in my birth chart that is conjunct something in my Jupiter return chart? That's going to amplify the energy. And in this case, the north node is conjunct my midheaven in the Jupiter return chart, adding to the benefic potential here of career opportunities and career success in Jupiter-related energies. And the south node would then be in the fourth house of the Jupiter return chart, okay, because the nodes are opposite each other always. And so that's really all I noticed with the angular activity, other than the north node and the midheaven. But now let's go back to the Jupiter return chart and talk about, well, how do we know when the magic's going to happen? Okay, so in your Jupiter return chart, guys, the Jupiter return time period often collides with Jupiter magic happening. You're going to feel it. And I just, in the beginning of the video, I talked about how that's working out in my world. You're going to feel this in your world. Then at that point, you want to pay attention to the transits that Jupiter makes in the sky. Okay, so when transiting Jupiter, today transiting Jupiter is here at 12.5 degrees of Pisces, okay? But you want to pay attention to when transiting Jupiter is going to cross an angle in any of the angles in your return chart over the next 12 years, because that is going to symbolize some big opportunity, big growth spurt in that area of life. Identity, first house, home and family, fourth house, partnership, seventh house, career, 10th house. So when Jupiter is in these signs at these degrees, by transit over the next 12 years, that is something to look out for. And you want to do that in your chart. Additionally, you want to look and see when transiting Jupiter is going to make a conjunction to each of the planets in the Jupiter return itself, because it will activate that potential, okay? Especially if there is an aspect between the planets. So for example, when Jupiter is exactly conjunct my ascendant in the Jupiter return, that's going to happen relatively soon. And then Neptune, which is going to happen relatively soon. All this is happening in the next several weeks, as a matter of fact. This Jupiter return chart really has a great push, a great start. Okay, lots of spiritual things happening for me. psychic moments, dreams coming true. Okay, Jupiter, Neptune, that's dream come true energy. I'll talk about that again in a separate video for you guys. Then Jupiter is going to go into Aries next year, and then Jupiter is going to go into Taurus. And then things get really interesting in my Jupiter return chart, because when Jupiter makes a conjunction to Uranus, and that's going to be in a couple of years, give or take, that is going to wake up the sextile that I talked about earlier between Jupiter and Uranus in my chart. So I don't have my ephemeris here, otherwise I would have given the date, but whatever that time period is, it's roughly 2 years from now, roughly, probably a little bit less actually. That is probably going to be an extremely materially successful time for me, because it's going to trigger that sextile, okay? And so on and so forth. You go around Jupiter transiting. Each of the conjunctions means something, and you're going to analyze it accordingly. Jupiter conjunct Venus, Jupiter conjunct Mars, Jupiter conjunct Pluto. That's going to happen when Jupiter's in Capricorn, years from now, okay? And when Jupiter is conjunct Uranus, going back to that, even though it's going to stimulate this yummy aspect, it's also going to stimulate that square. So there could be some kind of issue blowing up here, possibly with a friend, 11th house, possibly between me and my role in a group, okay? Could be. Who knows? I'm just predicting. This is predictions. You know, the fun part about making predictions, and I say this to my clients all the time, is that when I say this stuff to you, it sounds like I am talking out of my ass. It really sounds like I'm just making up stories. But what I'm doing is really talking about the symbolism of each planetary position and the connection that it's making. And I'm putting together a story in this language, this beautiful language that we call astrology. And it sounds crazy because it hasn't happened yet. But as the time of the prediction comes closer, it comes to life. And this is the beauty of predictive astrology. That's why I love being a predictive astrologer. Love it, love it, love it. All right, so that's how you can look at this Jupiter return in the Jupiter return chart. But remember these transits of Jupiter. The transits of Jupiter are going to be super, super important for timing. Now, I want to do something that I actually just noticed before this presentation. And I said, wow, we need to do more research as astrologers on this, because I don't know if there is enough information on this out there. I do not know. And I don't necessarily think that it is the most important thing to consider when we are making predictions in a Jupiter return. But the angularity of it was so compelling that I had to talk about this. So I'm going to bring you to my progressed chart. Okay, the progressed chart, if you don't know what progressions are, this is a method astrologers use to make predictions where we equate one day in the ephemeris to 1 year of your life. So if you were to go into the ephemeris, which is the table of all the planetary positions at any given day of any given year, and you look at the year and the day that you were born, that is your starting point, okay? That's 0. And then if you look for 90 days after that, that gives you a snapshot of the next 90 years of your life and the internal psychological changes that you're going through. And when that progressed chart is triggered by transits or external events manifest, okay? So the inner world matches up with the outer world. Now, by progression, in my progressed chart currently, my progressed moon is in Virgo. And the progressed moon cycle takes about 28.5 years to go around your chart. So right now, progressed moon's in Virgo for me. Today, it's at about 11, 12 degrees, somewhere around there. Jupiter progresses very slowly. So the outer planets progress very slowly. But Jupiter in my natal chart is 12.5 degrees. But by progression, guess where it has progressed to? I'm going to show you. Look at my ascendant, 17 degrees, 56 minutes of Pisces. And look at my progressed chart. And look, folks, at my progressed Jupiter right there, 17 degrees, 38 minutes. This is a progressed chart for July 15th, which is a few months ahead. Okay, I did that on purpose. I'll tell you why in a minute. So progressed Jupiter is not going to move. It's staying here. It'll move a couple of minutes, okay, over a few minutes, actually, I should say, several minutes over the 12-year period of my Jupiter return, because Jupiter moves very slowly. and you could see that because I was born 47 plus years ago with Jupiter at 12.5 degrees Pisces, and it took 47 plus years for it just to get to 17 degrees, 38 minutes by progression. Okay, so now that's significant because the progressed chart shows Jupiter is exactly conjunct the ascendant on my Jupiter return. And in my progressed chart, my progressed moon, which I said takes 28.5 years to go around the chart, July 15th, in July, it'll be 17 degrees, 26 minutes of Virgo. Progressed moon has about a 2-degree orb. So we use it, well, all progressed aspects, we use a 2-degree orb, but that's a whole other story. But just pay attention to the about 17.5 degrees of Virgo. Let's go back to the Jupiter return. Look at my descendant, 17 degrees, 56 minutes. So my progressed moon in mid-July will be conjunct my descendant, my partnership sector, and opposite is Jupiter. So Jupiter, and this is a Jupiter return, which is why I'm bringing the progressed chart in, because it's such a compelling angular aspect that will help time a prediction for me, which I have already timed in other lectures. Okay, so I do see a very significant relationship coming up for me the end of June into July, which is not too far away. Yes, this could be a business relationship, but other factors really talk about that it's likely to be more than that. It's likely to be personal. So, and it could be both, who knows? But the fact that the secondary progressed moon in July is going to be on an angle in the Jupiter return chart and is stimulated by Jupiter, which is by progression exactly conjunct the ascendant of my Jupiter return, that's compelling evidence, I would think, of stimulating something in the partnership dynamic for me. And again, this could be a business partnership, given that Jupiter rules the 10th house, but the moon rules the 5th house of romance. So literally, it could be both. Could be both. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention because I think more research should be done on this, on progressions, the progressed chart, and comparing the progressed chart to the return chart, because these are methods of prediction that we use as astrologers. And right now I'm doing an advanced skills class with some of my advanced astrology students who are practicing astrologers themselves, and they just wanted some more practice on consultations. And we just had a session where, just to review what you really are going to look for as a predictive astrologer, you're looking for the major outer planet transits, and then you're tying in the progressions and the solar arc directions for that year of a person's life to see what major energies there are. But I do encourage you to look at the solar return chart in every session. And if your client's having something like a Jupiter return or a Venus return at the time of your session, it's worth looking at if you have the time. More likely than not, though, this is the kind of thing that you're going to do for yourself, because these are very detailed predictive elements in astrology. So you're going to either do this for yourself, friends and family, or if you are an astrologer who does coaching sessions where you meet more often with clients like I do, a coaching client would benefit from something like this. You could look at the nooks and crannies like this because you have more time with your clients. So I think this video was long enough. I think you have a good idea of the Jupiter return, what it means, what to look for in terms of reading it to understand its potential over the next 12 years of your life, as well as the timing for predictive moments of when the magic is going to happen. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you all so much for watching. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.